On July 17, 1996, three young backpackers, Rafael Mendonca, 23, Camila Ferreira, 21, and Lucas Almeida, 22, were last seen in the small village of Edens, the gateway to the Lençóis Maranhenses National Park. The trio of friends, students at the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, had meticulously planned their vacation trip to the paradisiacal Maranhão destination as part of a photographic project documenting the lesser-explored natural beauty of Brazil. At winter of 1996, the Lençóis Maranhenses was showing its most stunning face. Crystal-clear lagoons at their peak, formed by the previous month's rains, contrasted with the white sand dunes stretching to the horizon. The weather conditions seemed ideal. A predominantly clear sky, an average temperature of 28 degrees Celsius, and moderate winds of 15 kilometers per hour. According to meteorological records, there was no forecast for storms or sudden weather changes for the following days. Rafael, an amateur photographer and journalism student, was known for his adventurous spirit and meticulous preparation. Camila, a biology undergraduate, had a special interest in the unique flora that developed on the edges of the interdunal lagoons. Lucas, in turn, was studying geography and intended to use the data collected on the expedition for his thesis. On coastal dune formations in northeastern Brazil, the three young people were staying at the Brisa do Mar Inn. They left behind non-essential belongings in their room, including some clothing, a laptop, and Camila's travel diaries. At the reception, they informed the owner, Dona Conceição Santos, that they planned a 2-day trek into the park, with a return expected by the evening of July 19th. They were very excited, but also seemed well prepared, reported Dona Conceição in her initial statement to the police. They carried backpacks with water, dehydrated food, GPS devices, compasses, and photographic equipment. Rafael even showed me a detailed map of the route they planned to take. The last confirmed sighting of the three was made by Jose Ribamar, a local fisherman who saw them around 6:30 a.m. when they began walking along the coastline before venturing into the dunes. They asked me for directions to the best route to reach Lagoa do Piques, which is about 12 kilometers from Itens. I explained the landmarks and warned them not to go too far, as it was easy to get lost when the dunes start to look the same, said. The fisherman images from Rafael's camera, later recovered from a film roll left at the inn, show the trio smiling on Etens Beach with the first dunes in the background, dated July 16th, the day before their disappearance. These are the last known visual records of the three young people. When they did not return on the expected date, Dona Conceição did not immediately worry. It was not uncommon for tourists to extend their stay in the dunes for an extra day, especially when the weather was good, she explained. It was only on the morning of July 21st, 2 days after the expected return, that the innkeeper contacted the authorities. The first search team was made up of local residents, tour guides, and 2 military police officers from the small detachment. Of Barreirinhas, the municipality that hosts the administrative headquarters of the national park. They followed the route indicated by Jose Ribamar, but found no trace of the backpackers. The preliminary search was hindered by a lack of adequate resources and the extremely challenging terrain. The dunes constantly change due to the wind, erasing footprints and altering the landscape in a matter of hours. On July 23, 1996, a more robust operation was mobilized, including the Maranhão Fire Department, military police with search dogs, and guards from ICM Bio, Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation. Brazilian Air Force helicopters flew over the region for 3 consecutive days, covering an area of approximately 70 square kilometers of the park, which has a total of 155,000 hectares of dunes, lagoons, restinga, and mangroves. The families of the young people, notified on July 22nd, arrived in Barreirinhas the following day. Carlos Mendonca, Rafael's father, described the moment as the beginning of an endless nightmare. "We arrived full of hope, thinking it was just a delay, that they had gotten lost momentarily, but were alive somewhere in that vast sea of sand." He said in an interview given years later, "The first 72 hours after the disappearance were crucial and intensely agonizing. As the initial searches yielded no results, the civil police of Maranhão took over the formal investigation of the case under the command of Detective Augusto Mareles. The first significant obstacle was the vastness and changing nature of the territory. The Lençóis Maranhenses, with its dunes that constantly moved due to the wind, posed a formidable challenge to investigators. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack that changes shape every day," explained Sergeant Claudio Nascimento of the fire department, who coordinated the ground search teams. "Even if we passed by a spot where they had been, the wind could have erased any trace in a matter of hours." On July 25, 1996, a first clue emerged. An empty water bottle from the brand the young people had bought in Barreirinhas was found near Lagoa do Piques, confirming that they had at least reached that point. Along with the bottle, marks in the sand suggested someone had recently sat there. However, there were no other signs in the vicinity. 2 days later, Rafael's hat, identified by his father, was found about 4 kilometers from Lagoa do Piques, toward the interior of the park, in an area rarely visited by tourists due to its difficult access. This discovery triggered a series of initial theories. The first hypothesis considered by investigators was that the young people had gotten lost while venturing beyond the conventional tourist routes. Local guides confirmed that without fixed landmarks and with dunes reaching up to 40 meters in height, it was easy to lose one's sense of direction, especially for inexperienced visitors. The GPS the group carried could have failed due to exposure to sand or water. Even experienced people can get disoriented in the Lençóis if conditions change rapidly, explained Francisco das Chagas, a tour guide with 15 years of experience. In the region. It was July 17, 1996, when 3 young backpackers, Rafael Mendonca, 23, Camila Ferreira, 21, and Lucas Almeida, 22, were last seen in the small village of Ottens, the gateway to the Lençóis Maranhenses National Park. The trio, friends and students from the Federal University of Rio de Janeiro, had meticulously planned their vacation trip to the paradisiacal Maranhão destination as part of a photographic project documenting Brazil's lesser-known natural beauty. In that winter of 1996, the Lençóis Maranhenses displayed its most stunning face. Crystal-clear lagoons at their peak, formed by the previous month's rains, contrasted with the white sand dunes stretching to the horizon. The weather conditions seemed ideal: a predominantly clear sky, an average temperature of 28 degrees Celsius, and moderate winds of 15 kilometers per hour. According to meteorological records, no storms or sudden weather changes were forecast for the following days. Rafael, an amateur photographer and journalism student, was known for his adventurous spirit and meticulous preparation. Camila, a biology undergraduate, had a special interest in the unique flora that grew along the edges of the interdunal lagoons. Lucas, a geography student, intended to use the data gathered on the expedition for his thesis on coastal dune formations. In northeastern Brazil, the 3 young travelers stayed at the Brisa do Mar Inn, leaving behind non-essential items in their room, including some clothes, a laptop, and Camila's travel diaries. At the reception, they informed the owner, Dona Conceição Santos, that they would be embarking on a 2-day trek into the park, with a return expected by the evening of July 19th. They were very excited, but also seemed well prepared. Dona Conceição reported in her initial statement to the police. They carried backpacks filled with water, dehydrated food, GPS devices, compasses, and photographic equipment. Raphael even showed me a detailed map of their planned route. The last confirmed sighting of the three was made by Jose Ribamar, a local fisherman who saw them around 6:30 a.m. when they began walking along the coastline before venturing into the dunes. They asked me for directions to the best route to reach Lagoa do Piques, which is about 12 kilometers from Itens. I explained the landmarks and warned them not to go too far, as it's easy to get lost when the dunes start to look the same, said. The fisherman got images from Raphael's camera, later recovered from a film roll left at the inn, show the trio smiling on Etins Beach with the first dunes in the background, dated July 16th, the day before their disappearance. These are the last known visual records of the three young people. When they did not return as scheduled, Donna Kanseyaku was not immediately alarmed. It was not uncommon for tourists to extend their stay in the dunes for an extra day, especially when the weather was good, she explained. It was only on the morning of July 21st, 2 days after the expected return, that the innkeeper contacted the authorities. The first search team was made up of local residents, tour guides, and 2 military police officers from the small detachment of Barreirinhas, the municipality that hosts the administrative headquarters of the national park. They followed the route indicated by Jose Ribamar, but found no trace of the backpackers. The preliminary search was hindered by a lack of adequate resources and the extremely challenging terrain. The dunes, which constantly shift due to the wind, erase footprints and alter the landscape in a matter of hours. On July 23, 1996, a more robust operation was mobilized, including the Maranhão Fire Department, military police with search dogs, and guards from ICMBio, Chico Mendes Institute for Biodiversity Conservation. Brazilian Air Force helicopters flew over the region for 3 consecutive days, covering an area of approximately 70 square kilometers of the park, which has a total of 155,000 hectares of dunes, lagoons, restinga, and mangroves. The families of the young people, notified on July 22nd, arrived in Barreirinhas the following day. Carlos Mendonça, Raphael's father, described the moment as the beginning of an endless nightmare. We arrived full of hope, thinking it was just a delay, that they had gotten lost momentarily, but were alive somewhere in that vast sea of sand. He said in an interview years later, the first 72 hours after the disappearance were crucial and intensely agonizing. As the initial searches yielded no results, the civil police of Maranhão took over the formal investigation of the case under the command of Detective Augusto Moirelles. The first significant obstacle was the vastness and constantly changing nature of the territory. The Lençóis Maranhenses, with its dunes that are constantly shifting due to the wind, posed a formidable challenge for investigators. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack that changes shape every day, explained Sergeant Claudio Nascimento of the fire department, who coordinated the ground search teams. Even if we passed by a spot where they had been, wind could have erased any trace in a matter of hours. On July 25, 1996, a first clue emerged. An empty water bottle from the brand the young people had bought in Barreirinhas was found near Lagoa do Piques, confirming that they had at least reached that point. Along with the bottle, marks in the sand suggested someone had recently sat there. However, there were no other signs nearby. 2 days later, Raphael's hat, identified by his father, was found about 4 kilometers from Lagoa do Piques, toward the interior of the park, in an area rarely visited by tourists due to its difficult access. This discovery triggered a series of initial theories. The first hypothesis considered by investigators was that the young people had gotten lost while venturing beyond the conventional tourist routes. Local guides confirmed that without fixed landmarks and with dunes reaching up to 40 meters in height, it was easy to lose one's sense of direction, especially for inexperienced visitors. A GPS the group carried could have failed due to exposure to sand or water. Even experienced people can get disoriented in the Lençóis if conditions change rapidly, explained Francisco das Chagas, a tour guide with 15 years of experience. In the region, as the weather changed or it got darker, all visual reference points disappear. A second line of investigation emerged when police discovered that Raphael had made significant withdrawals before the trip, taking with him around 3,000 rials in cash, a considerable amount at the time. This raised the possibility of a crime with financial motives. However, the theory was quickly dismissed when residents of Athens and Barbarinas, who were extensively interviewed, did not exhibit suspicious behavior or show signs of sudden wealth. In August 1996, a new perspective on the case emerged when a fisherman from a neighboring community, Antonio Juca, reported seeing strange lights in the sky over the dunes on the night of July 17th to 18th. There were 3 or 4 luminous points moving in an unnatural way. They would stop and then quickly change direction, he described. Although his report was officially recorded, investigators considered it of little relevance, attributing the observation to meteorological phenomena or optical illusions common. In the region, the third and most unsettling theory emerged when authorities found signs of a campfire on August 7th. Approximately 18 kilometers from Athens, in an area known as Val da Lua, due to the peculiar dune formations. Near the extinguished fire, remnants of food matching what the young people had taken were found. More concerning was a partially buried backpack containing Lucas's field journal and a damaged camera. The examination of the film in the camera revealed blurry images of dunes and one particularly disturbing photo, which appeared to show a distant human figure atop a dune. By dusk, however, the quality of the image did not allow for clear identification. That photo was the first indication that something more than a simple disappearance could have occurred, said Detective Myrels in his preliminary report. The arrangement of the items found suggested an abrupt interruption of the camp, possibly a flight or confrontation. As the investigation progressed, reports emerged about smuggling routes crossing remote points of the Lençóis Maranhenses, connecting Maranhão's coastline to clandestine ports. This information opened a new investigative line. The young people might have inadvertently witnessed some illegal activity. In September 1996, after nearly 2 months of intensive searches, the official operation was gradually scaled down. The families, still desperate, hired private investigators and continued independent searches for another 3 months without success. The case remained formally open, but with few practical investigative activities after the first year. Theories multiplied as the evidence dwindled. Rumors about mystical rituals in the dunes, criminal groups using the park as a hideout, and even stories about isolated communities living in remote areas of the park gained traction among the local population. Although none of these versions were officially corroborated, the case sporadically resurfaced in the national media between 1997 and 2004, usually tied to the anniversary of the disappearance, or when similar cases occurred in other natural areas. Of Brazil, a documentary produced by TV Maranhão in 2002 briefly rekindled public interest, but it did not bring any new elements to the investigation. In 2006, 10 years after the disappearance, the case was formally reclassified as unsolvable due to a lack of evidence. Although technically still open, the families never gave up on finding answers, meeting annually in Barbarinas to keep the memory of the 3 young people alive and pressure the authorities for new investigations. The case of the 3 missing backpackers in the Lençóis Maranhenses remained dormant for over a decade, with only sporadic investigations and no significant progress. It was only in January 2015, nearly 19 years after their disappearance, that a new and unexpected element emerged, reviving interest in the mystery that seemed destined to be forgotten. Marcos Vinicius Costa, a biologist from ICM Bioresponsible, for monitoring species in the Lençóis Maranhenses, was conducting an aerial survey of local wildlife when he noticed an anomaly in a remote area of the park, about 27 kilometers from Etins, in a region known as the sector of Andurinas. When flying over the area, he identified what appeared to be a non-natural structure among the dunes. It was a rectangular formation, about 8 meters by 12 meters, visible only from a certain angle and height, Costa reported in his official statement. The pattern was clearly distinct from natural formations, as if someone had deliberately moved the sand to create that shape. An immediate land expedition was organized. After 2 days of walking through the dunes, the team arrived at the site and made a surprising discovery. Stones of varying sizes had been arranged to spell out the word SOS in giant letters, visible only from above. Initial analysis indicated that the stones, which are not naturally found in the dunes, had been transported from distant areas, probably from the coastal region. Even more impressive, the stones were partially buried in the sand, suggesting that the structure had been built a long time ago and periodically uncovered and rearranged, as if someone had been maintaining the distress signal visible over the years. Whoever did this put in a monumental effort, explained Luia Montero, a geologist and consultant brought in to analyze the site. Each of these stones weighs between 5 and 25 kilograms. Transporting them kilometers across the dunes without vehicles would require extraordinary determination. Near the SOS signal, the team found a natural cavity between dunes stabilized by vegetation, which appeared to have been enlarged and adapted to serve as a shelter. Inside, they found deteriorated objects, remnants of a backpack similar to those described as belonging to the missing young people, fragments of what seemed to be a camping tent, and the most significant discovery, a small notebook sealed in plastic containers. The notebook, later identified as belonging to Camila Ferreira by her distinctive handwriting, contained dated entries that spanned from July 1996 to August 1997. The last pages were illegible due to deterioration, but the recoverable content revealed shocking details about what had happened to the 3 backpackers. According to Camila's notes, the group had deviated from their original route to photograph an unusual phenomenon, a lagoon almost perfectly circular in shape, undocumented on the park's official maps. On the evening of July 17th, while setting up camp near this lagoon, they heard engine sounds and saw lights approaching. We hid behind a dune and saw at least 6 men unloading boxes from a jeep adapted for the dunes. Camila wrote on July 18th, "They seemed armed, Lucas thinks. We accidentally discovered some kind of smuggling operation." The following entries revealed that the 3 decided to discreetly move away, but were spotted. "We ran for hours in the dark. Raphael lost his hat during the escape. We don't know if we're being followed, but we decided not to light a fire. Tonight." In the following days, the young people tried to find their way back, but disoriented and with limited supplies, they ended up moving further into a more remote area of the park. The journal entries become more spaced out, indicating the conservation of the paper, and describe their struggle for survival, collecting water from seasonal lagoons, attempting to hunt small animals, and constructing the first SOS signal with stones. The entry from August 7th reveals Lucas has had a fever for 3 days, possibly malaria or some infection. Without proper medication, his condition is worsening. Raphael continues to expand. The SOS signal, bleeding will be spotted by a plane. The content of the diary confirmed the theory that the young people had witnessed activities of a smuggling network that used the isolated area of the Lençóis Maranhenses as a transport route. This revelation led to the formal reopening of the investigation in February 2015, now conducted by the federal police in cooperation with the civil police of Marano. Forensic analysis of the shelter and the objects found brought more evidence. DNA samples extracted from hair strands found at the site matched Camila's and Raphael's genetic profiles. Campfire marks suggested prolonged occupation. Stratigraphic analysis of the sand indicated that the shelter had been used periodically over several years, with layers of occupation interspersed with periods of abandonment. More intriguingly, the analyses suggested that the shelter had last been used about 3 to 4 years prior to the discovery, meaning around 2011, well after the dates recorded in Camila's diary. In June 2015, a joint operation by the federal police and the National Force, called Operation Mirage, dismantled a smuggling network that had been operating in the Lençóis Maranhenses region for over 2 decades. Among those arrested was Eduardo Santana, a former tour guide from Barreiras, who confessed to knowing about the case of the missing backpackers. According to his testimony, the young people had been chased after witnessing an unloading operation, exactly as described in Camila's diary. However, contrary to the evidence from the shelter found, Santana claimed the 3 had been captured in July 1996 and eliminated to prevent them from reporting what they had seen. Santana's version presented serious inconsistencies when compared to the physical evidence, explained federal detective Carolina Drummond, who took over the investigation in 2015. The shelter, the continuous use pattern of the site, and especially the recent occupation dates, do not align with his confession. Leave a comment if you believe the truth should never be abandoned and all missing persons deserve to be found. The decisive turn in the case came in March 2023, when a team of cameramen producing a documentary about the Lençóis Maranhenses, using advanced drones to map remote areas of the park, captured images of a new SOS signal, different from the one discovered in 2015, approximately 8 kilometers from the original shelter. This new signal had been recently created, with stones arranged in an orderly manner and no signs of accumulated sand. Beside the stones, a red fabric was stretched on the ground, clearly positioned to attract attention. The rescue operation, mobilized within 24 hours, led to the most extraordinary turn of events in the 27 years of the case. Raphael Mendonça was found alive, malnourished, and in poor health, but conscious. He was the first of the 3 backpackers to be located after nearly 3 decades. Raphael, now 52 years old and recognizable compared to photos from his youth, was immediately transported to the University Hospital in Snow Louise. After stabilization, he began to reveal the incredible story of survival and tragedy that unfolded in the dunes of Murano. According to his account, later confirmed by physical evidence and further investigations, the 3 young people had indeed witnessed smuggling operations and fled, as recorded in Camila's diary. Lost and disoriented, they managed to survive. Initially thanks to Camila's knowledge of biology, which allowed her to identify edible plants along the edges of the lagoons, and Lucas's navigation skills, who used the stars to try to maintain a sense of direction. We built the first shelter between fixed dunes, where vegetation prevented the sand from burying us during the night, Raphael recalled. We believed we would be found in a few days, or at worst, weeks. When their provisions ran out and the situation became critical, Lucas developed a high fever and symptoms of infection, probably due to an injury he sustained during the initial escape. Without proper medication, his condition deteriorated rapidly. Lucas passed away in August 1996, approximately 3 weeks after they got lost, Raphael said, his voice breaking. We buried his body at the base of a fixed dune, marking the spot with a stone arrangement. Over the decades, I visited the site annually to keep the marker, but the landscape changed so much that I'm not sure if I could still find the exact spot. Lucas's death was a devastating blow to the 2 survivors, who intensified their efforts to create visible distress signals. They arranged stones in the shape of SOS and kept campfires burning whenever they spotted or heard aircraft dot in. The following months, Raphael and Camilla adapted to life in the dunes. They learned to extract water from seasonal lagoons, developed traps for small animals, and identified edible plants in the coastal Restinga areas. They built a more permanent shelter between stabilized dunes, protected from the winds and the constant movement of sand. We developed a survival routine, explained Raphael. During the day, we searched for food and water. At dusk, we climbed the tallest dunes to look for any signs of civilization. The night was dedicated to maintaining and expanding our SOS signals. The most surprising part of Raphael's account was the revelation that in April 1997, 9 months after their disappearance, Camilla gave birth to a girl, the child of her relationship with Raphael, conceived before the trip to the Lençóis Maranhenses. We didn't know Camilla was pregnant when we started the trip, Raphael shared. It was simultaneously the happiest and most terrifying moment of our lives. We named the girl Esperanca, Hope. The birth, which took place without medical assistance, was exceptionally difficult. Although the child was born healthy, Camilla developed postpartum complications that, combined with the harsh conditions and malnutrition, led to her death 2 weeks later. I buried Camilla next to Lucas, promising her that I would do everything to keep our daughter alive and one day return to civilization, Raphael recalled. It was this promise that kept me sane over all these years. The survival of a newborn under those extreme conditions seemed impossible, but Raphael developed some astonishing techniques. He extracted milk from young coconuts found in a small area between the dunes and coastal vegetation. He chewed fruits and plants to feed the baby and built a special shelter to protect her from the intense sun and sandstorms. Esperanca grew up without contact with civilization, learning to survive in the hostile environment of the dunes. Raphael taught her what he could about the outside world, using drawings in the sand and stories told at night. She never saw a car, a building, or a television, he explained. Her world consisted of the dunes, the lagoons, and the starry sky. Still, I tried to educate her as best as I could, teaching her how to count, to recognize letters I drew in the sand, and most importantly, to keep the hope that one day we would be rescued. Why had they never been found all these years despite the searches? Raphael explained that initially, the fear of retaliation from the smugglers kept them away from frequented areas. Then, as time passed and hope diminished, they established a nomadic routine, moving between different points in the park according to the seasons, always far from tourist routes. There were moments when we saw groups of people from a distance, but fear paralyzed us, he admitted. After so many years isolated, we developed a kind of aversion to contact. Esperanca, especially, was terrified of the idea of encountering other people. The change came in 2022 when Esperanca, now 25 years old, fell seriously ill with symptoms that Raphael couldn't treat with his limited knowledge and natural resources. Desperate, he decided they needed to seek help, regardless of the consequences. They intensified their efforts to be found, creating new SOS signals at different points and risking getting closer to areas frequented by tourists. In January 2023, Raphael attempted to reach Athens, but got lost again due to the changes in the landscape after nearly 3 decades. He returned to the shelter, where Esperanca was waiting, only to find her unconscious. In the following days, her condition worsened significantly. She passed away in my arms in February 2023, Raphael said, his voice breaking. I buried my daughter next to her mother and Lucas, and at that moment, something inside me broke. I decided I could no longer live in the dunes, carrying the weight of these losses. It was then that he built the final SOS signal, using all his remaining strength to collect stones and a piece of red fabric from his old tent that he had preserved over the years. After Raphael's rescue, in March 2023, an extensive operation was mobilized to locate the remains of Lucas, Camila, and Esperanca. Guided by Raphael's directions and using ground-penetrating radar technology, the team located the three bodies in April 2023, buried exactly as Raphael had described, preserved by the dry sand of the Lençóis. Forensic analysis confirmed the identities of Lucas and Camila, and DNA tests proved that Esperanca was indeed the biological daughter of the couple. The causes of death aligned precisely with Raphael's account. Lucas had died from a generalized infection. Camila had passed away from postpartum complications, and Esperanca showed signs of severe pneumonia. The investigation into the smuggling network was resumed, resulting in the arrest of 14 more people linked to the criminal organization, including 2 former park employees who facilitated the illegal operations. Eduardo Santana, who had falsely confessed to the murder of the young people in 2015, was charged with obstruction of justice and perjury. Rafael Mendonca's return to society, after 29 years of isolation in the Lençóis Maranhenses, became one of the most extraordinary cases of reintegration ever documented by modern psychology. After his physical stabilization at the University Hospital of São Luís, where he stayed for 47 days, Rafael was transferred to a specialized clinic in São Paulo, dedicated to his reintegration process. The challenge was not just physical, but primarily psychological and social, explained Dr. Marina Peixoto, the psychiatrist responsible for the case. We were dealing with someone who spent more time isolated in the dunes than living in society. The world he knew in 1996 simply no longer existed. The reintegration process turned out to be as fascinating as it was painful. Raphael exhibited reactions of astonishment and confusion at the technologies that emerged during his isolation. Smartphones, the internet, social media, electric vehicles, and digital payment systems were completely alien to him. His first video call with his parents, Carlos, then 82, and Helena, 79, was an intensely emotional moment that captured national attention. I imagine them every day, Raphael said. I drew their faces in the sand so Esperanca could know her. Grandparents. Seeing them aging on the computer screen was like a surreal dream. The in-person reunion with his family, which took place in June 2023 at the House of Parents in Rio de Janeiro, was broadcast live by television networks with Raphael's consent, who expressed the desire to share his story as a way of honoring the memory of Lucas, Camila, and Esperanca. In September 2023, after 6 months of readjustment, Raphael published a book titled 29 Years in the Dunes, a story of survival and loss, which quickly became an international bestseller translated into 28 languages. In the book, he detailed survival techniques developed over the decades, insights on isolation and human resilience, and profound reflections on connection, loss, and purpose. The case brought significant changes to the management and safety of the Lençóis Maranhenses National Park. The federal government implemented a new monitoring system with autonomous drones that regularly patrol the most remote areas, both for the safety of visitors and to combat illegal activities. A special search and rescue protocol, named the Mendonca Protocol, was developed specifically for dunes and shifting terrains. In November 2023, in a symbolic gesture of closure, Raphael returned to the Lençóis Maranhenses, this time accompanied by security teams and documentary filmmakers, to hold a farewell ceremony at the site where he buried his family. The Chico Mendes Institute, ICM Bio, authorized the installation of a small memorial plaque, the first and only permanent structure allowed within the park, bearing the names of Lucas, Camila, and Esperanca. This story is not just about physical survival, but about the extraordinary human ability to find purpose, even in the most extreme circumstances, observed Professor Enrique Tavares, an anthropologist at USP, who extensively studied the case. Raphael not only survived, but created his own microculture, with rituals, techniques, and knowledge developed in complete isolation. In April 2024, the remains of Lucas, Camila, and Esperanza were finally laid to rest in a special memorial at São João Batista Cemetery in Rio de Janeiro, in a ceremony that gathered hundreds of people. The memorial, designed by renowned architect Paulo Mendes da Roca, incorporates elements from the dunes of the Lençóis Maranhenses in its structure. Currently, Raphael is dedicated to giving lectures on survival and resilience, and has established the Esperanza Foundation, which promotes research on survival techniques in extreme environments and offers psychological support to people who have gone through long periods of isolation or traumatic experiences. The SOS signal in the dunes that led to Raphael's rescue was preserved as it was and is now monitored by satellite by the ICMBio as part of the park's historical heritage, a permanent symbol of the extraordinary saga of survival, loss, and hope that unfolded silently for 29 years in the heart of the Lençóis Maranhenses. If you watched until the end, it's because you care about these cases that forever mark families. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until the end so that I can know you and see who truly cares about the search for the truth." Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends and family who are also interested in real stories of disappearances and survival in extreme circumstances. Amen.